And hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channels. They are called McDuff Lives 1, McDuff Lives 3, and McDuff on Facebook. And welcome, everyone. And also welcome to our guest, David Cranmer Underdown, who is kind enough to join me on a Friday morning. We usually have our get-togethers on Wednesday evenings, but David was kind enough to rearrange. And so thank you so much, David, for joining me once again. And how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, thanks. I hope you had a fun birthday celebration Wednesday.
Yeah, she was happy, and that's what counts. I I was required to eat most of the birthday cake, though. She she only had one piece, and I thought, wow, I bought this whole cake, and she's only going to have one. Oh well, I'll do what I have to do here. I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
So I took care of it. It's still working on it, but yeah, very nice, and thank you for your kind wishes for drummer's birthday on July 20th, the day the man walked on the moon,
Hmm.
and a lot of other crazy stuff happened on July 20th. It's funny, you look through certain days. My favorite one has always been April 19th because of the Paul Revere's ride and Waco and all kinds of things happened on April 19th. Just really strange when you think about how things get coordinated. And of course, June 6th is another one. We are now in a 6 year, by the way. 2022 is a six, and so any other combinations like the 5th of January or anything else that comes out to be sixes, well, look out, something could happen. Um, they do. They line things up. This is the Kabbalah. This is the alternative to Jesus Christ. If you're growing up in Europe and you really don't think that you want to go into this Jesus thing and believe in God, Jesus, and the Christian story that you've been told by your parents, then hang around the Freemasons for a while, and you'll learn a whole different way to look at life. It's not about spirits and God and all that. It's all about numbers and numerology, and if you have the right numbers, then you can win. And I bet you'd like to be a winner. So come on into the lodge. We'll show you how to do it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But I've been working uh, on Ukraine a lot. I've been going back to my sources, and in this new book I got by David Dorrell uh, called MI6. It's an 800 page, and about 800 pound book that was published in 2000 and before 9/11, but it is really thorough in terms of what the MI6 was doing in Europe, and particularly in the area of Ukraine, uh, Belarusia, and Poland, and all of that whole swath of countries that we've identified as the old Pale from the from the Tsar times. um, that area right now is really, really hot because of this war. And this war in Ukraine, described as a proxy war between the West and Russia, also is an extenuation of the ancient war between the Roman Catholic Church and the Byzantine or Russian Rite, where it seems that over the years, the popes have just been really, really mad at the Byzantines or the Orthodox in the sense that, how dare they, have a competing Christian religion. And so much of these wars, like especially in Serbia, where Serbia, being Orthodox, is always being attacked by uh, proxies of the Pope, proxies of the Roman Catholic Church, such as Austria-Hungary, and now the whole NATO thing. It can also be seen as a proxy war against the Orthodox Church by the Roman Catholic Church. But at that point, it kind of breaks down because people are skeptical. They say, nah, the church, they don't have that kind of power. They couldn't possibly influence what armies do. Remember, Joseph Stalin famously said, "How many divisions has the Pope?" Like he doesn't care what the Pope says unless he's got at least 100 divisions ready to march. Well, anyway, that's enough out of me. What you've been working on?
Well, in that spirit, I mean, I'm always looking at the the history of the intelligence agencies, and of course the post World War II is really interesting because of course it ties right into now. But going back before that, I'm always trying to understand why my different people ended up in places like around me, because there's just so many coincidences on things. And one of the things that was always really um, something I never focused on, but is just so intriguing now, is that my mom grew up in Bloomington, Indiana. As we've just learned, Hermann Muller was her neighbor on University Street. Who Hermann Muller was somebody that Mark Kulak just this week has said he really thinks his radium is the genesis of a lot of the the creation of the Human Genome Project, and all those things come from Hermann Muller. Now, when my mom moved to Bloomington in 1949, she my grandma started a nursery school, and there were 4 kids in it, and one of the kids was the grandniece of Edward Beneš, who was the second Czechoslovakian president. And he was the one that fled Czechoslovakia after the Munich Agreement. He moves to London. He starts the Czech government in exile, where he works with the SOE closely. And before that, he was partnered with a guy named Thomas Masaryk, who was the first president of Czechoslovakia. And Masaryk has an intelligence network that he runs through the University of Chicago. And he comes to the University of Chicago in, I think, 1915. He's the patron of, I think it's Howard Crane. It was the plumbing Crane, the one that ended up doing the negotiation with Russia with Elihu Root. But he comes to Chicago, and he's working on the German Hindu conspiracy in World War I as an intelligence officer, and he has a European intelligence agency, a Czechoslovakian agency that Edward Beneš is part of. And the other thing that's intriguing about them was their group, before Czechoslovakia was a country, was called Mafia, and it was MAFFIE. And so, of course, I never thought of that, because it was always, the stories were always like, oh, we'd go over to the Beneš's house, and we'd eat the grandma would make the Eastern European food and soups, and we'd jump on the beds and stuff. And I never thought, oh, well, Czechoslovakia, that was a big part of World War II. And so that, of course, then ties in, because my mom's friend Ava's father was the brother of Zbigniew Brzezinski's wife. So Emily Beneš, who marries Brzezinski, is the sister of my mom's friend's dad. Now, the other thing that's intriguing about it is Madeleine Albright's father, whose name is Joseph Korbel, who founds the University of Denver School of Government. He is an agent of Edward Beneš in London for the Czechoslovakian intelligence agency during World War II.
Holy moly. I just stop for a second. I gotta catch my breath. Wow. So we've got Beneš, Benes, with a little thingy on top of the S. Sometimes it's the Czechoslovakian spelling.
Right.
Becomes the head of the government in exile during World War II, or before it, as a result of the Munich Agreement, and this Sudetenland being stripped off of the Czech and Slovak areas,
Right.
Which is basically is taking the exterior. If you just drew a kind of a 50-mile wide line around the exterior of Czechoslovakia. That's like the Sudetenland. It's just where the Germans happen to have moved in that far. Well, anyway, taking all of that away is to take away the industrial and anyway, they stole the money at the same time. They took all the money out of it. But
Right. That
as
was
as he goes to London, he becomes, if he's not already, an agent of the British.
Churchill. He meets with them like almost daily.
So, okay, so it's Churchill, and
Hmm.
he meets with Churchill almost daily. This this ties exactly in with what I've been studying about. I've mentioned this before. It's called the intermarium. Intermarium's a Latin combination of between the seas, between the oceans, and it means between the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea and the Aegean. And the countries that fit within that are basically the same ones that were the Pale, basically the same ones that were originally, 1,000 years ago, the Kievan Rus area, as opposed to the Muscovite Russians that we have to start learning the distinction between the Kievan and the Muscovites and the Slavs and the anyway, that all of that
Yeah.
is part of what we have to study this whole area. So I've been digging into it, and it appears that the Slovak side was generally Orthodox, whereas the Czech side more Roman Catholic. And it was an attack upon the Slovak side during the war in order to foster the interest of the Catholic Church to get rid of the Orthodox clergy and suppress the Orthodox religion in that part of what we now call, or we used to call, Czechoslovakia. Now it's a separate country. But anyway, that all of this reflects what surprised me very much was when I got to this book on MI6 by Doril, and I had been thinking about the Intermarium, and I just got it in the mail, and I open it up, and I'm looking at the chapter titles, and like chapter 5 or 6 is called Intermarium.
Hmm.
Wow, what a coincidence! So I dug right into it, and the first thing it says is Churchill. It's a Churchill project.
Yep.
So the whole idea of uniting all of these Eastern European countries from the Baltic states down to Romania, and basically Ukraine, the Ukraine is the southern key to it,
Right.
is a Churchill project. And right after World War II, and during World War II and before World War II, he was very much in favor of establishing a powerful buffer state between Western Europe and the Soviet Union that would be run kind of like the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. So that's why he supported the 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 Austrians, the Viennese. But
I just
that
want to point out
Yeah,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing.
I threw too much in myself. Go ahead.
I want to say too with Churchill, another fascinating part of Churchill was when he was the admiral of the Navy, or their basically their Secretary of Navy. He's
Lord of
the
the
one,
Admiralty.
Lord of the Admiralty. He's the one that did the conversion from coal to petroleum, and
Yeah.
that's the British Petroleum, Anglo-Persian, um, the entire Middle East. That's the beginning of Iran, which of course then turns into the overthrow, the Operation Ajax, which pulls in all of the Kim Roosevelt and all those characters with the OSS and CIA. And then now you get into the Iran Contra, which again is Brzezinski. Again, that's Operation, what was it? Cyclone was the 79, the hostages. I thought that was Brzezinski's operation for.
I don't remember the operation name being Cyclone. But it could be. I just don't remember the
Okay.
name.
So Churchill's, he's so, so that part's interesting. The other thing that's really, I think helpful in understanding sort of the OSS and SOE legs is that when this Masaryk, the Thomas Masaryk, is in Chicago and working working for British intelligence in the United States, he is peered with William Wiseman, who I've talked about before. Wiseman was a partner of Kuhn and Loeb, and he worked with a guy named Julius Klein, who was the mentor of Max Fisher, who I've talked about. And William Wiseman, besides being, I think, 40-year partner of Kuhn and Loeb, which of course brings in the Warburgs and the Jacob Schiff and all these, kind of important characters, Otto Kahn, that he's the mentor for William Stevenson. So, we talk about Intrepid and, setting up the British security coordination in Rockefeller Center. And I mean, I always want to keep repeating that it's in the Rockefeller Center, the RCA building. So, we think of the Rockefellers with, their foundations, but they were Standard Oil and they were also media. They were NBC. So anything that is NBC is very tainted to me. So, when you get, characters people want to cheer for, if you have an NBC show, to me, you're probably a leg of CIA. I mean, Allen Dulles had his office. 3603 was his office in the Rockefeller Center.
And he famously referred to his own operation as the mighty Wurlitzer.
Okay.
In the sense of a great organ, like they used to have when I used to go roller skating. There was a place that had a great big organ. It had all of these organs, all around the top, the ceiling of it, and a mighty Wurlitzer was a thing back in the 20th century. And what he meant was that he published, and it was a publishing organ. And this
Mm-hmm.
organ was just pushing stuff out there. And of course, you've identified one of the main stops of his organ, and that would be NBC and the television empire. So useful to them still to this day, if not even more useful now than it was then. I guess back then they had more of a captive audience, but today they have more control over the entire diversity of broadcast media. So to the extent that I mean, that's what they wanted, and they set it up, and now they got it, and
And
they've
that's,
they've been
yeah.
running a fake world. So when I realized I had not known that Woodrow Wilson had adopted Walter Lippmann as an advisor, and they were intimately involved in creating this false sense of reality that we now find ourselves living in.
Yeah.
That we are the smart people, so we have a duty to all the dumb people to create a narrative. And this narrative is going to be good enough for them to live with. They'll be fine. They're just the dumb people, and they're going to absorb what we say as if it was the truth. And unfortunately for them, the people like you and me and our parents and the people that value real education and real knowledge and to understand the real duties of how to keep a free country free, how to be a good citizen, we rise up. We say, no, I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to accept, your narrative when it conflicts with my sense of right, wrong, or reality, or fake news. I will not accept it. It incenses me when I see people, and so many of my friends are just, as you and I have talked about many times. It's sad,
Yeah.
but we have to accept that the narrative has been successful. The Walter Lippmanns and the mind control experts, they're all winning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. It's,
to what end? To what end? To just
it,
finally eliminate the thoughtful part of humanity?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like they just have to go to just a chaos strategy. I mean, I feel like that's what it's been, is just have a million balls in the air that you can't follow it. One thing too that I think is important to remember is that NBC's, cable news is MSNBC, which is for Microsoft. So don't get Microsoft out of the picture. They're partners with General Electric and NBC. Then, of course, David Sarnoff being the key person at RCA. To backtrack to Czechoslovakia, one thing that I also wanted to mention was, because it ties to RCA, is that the governor of the Bank of England, who was Montague Norman, he was the person that transferred the Czechoslovakian treasury's gold to the Bank of International Settlement. So when we're talking about Bennis and the intelligence, don't leave out that they looted their treasury to start the BIS. The other interesting.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I knew they looted the treasury, but I didn't know that it was to start the BIS.
I'm pretty sure. Well, the Bank of International Settlement, again, was started by what was called the Young Committee. And the Young Committee was Owen Young, who was the creator of RCA. A lot of people say it's Sarnoff. It was Sarnoff a couple of years after Owen Young. But Owen Young, it was Thomas Lamont and J.P. Morgan Jr. were the three American representatives for the Young Plan. And the Bank of International Settlements was set up to administer the reparations, which was the Young Plan for the Treaty of Versailles. So that was the original staking, I think, of the capital for Bank of International Settlements, I believe, was when they transferred Czechoslovakia's gold, which of course had the famous mine and armaments company. I'm trying to think what it was called. Is it Silesia? The Silesia mines? I think that's what it was. But they said that the reason that Hitler wanted the Sudetenland, I don't Sudetenland, is because it had this, I believe it's the Silesia mine, and also they had an armaments factory, which was one of the world leading places to create weapons of war. And so that, I'm sure, led to quite a treasury. And I think that treasury was then sent off. And, we've talked about Habsburgs and all these different empires, but, that's sort of what my gut is on that, is that what they were doing was taking some of the old Habsburg kind of Holy Roman Empire treasure and then transferring it to Switzerland. But back to Sarnoff, he's also interesting to me as the RCA president, because he creates NBC, but he also starts what's called the Sarnoff Corporation, which is an RCA laboratory, and that's in Princeton, Indiana. And that, of course, then does a lot of these, secret projects within the National Security Research Council, which, as we know, Vannevar Bush and Carl Compton are the ones that are kind of leading that effort. That becomes the Sarnoff Lab. And of course, my grandfather was recruited to go there, in 45. He was recruited to go to New Jersey. He worked for RCA. He ended up staying in Bloomington. So that's like part of why all this stuff is so personal for me, because it's like, okay, you read these things like, well, this Herman Muller ends up in Bloomington and he's doing all of this work with the fruit flies and with radiation in fruit flies. And he's, drawing all these top scientists in the world are coming to Bloomington, Indiana. I'm like, well, why are people going to Bloomington? I mean, I've been to Bloomington a lot, and it's a beautiful campus. It is a college town. It has all the limestone buildings. But I never knew it had all of these like intrigues, especially with science and with armaments. I hate to say it, but the Crane Surface Warfare Center is right next to Bloomington, and that is supposedly the largest Navy, radio weapons facility, and it's just, I think, 15 miles from Bloomington. I know my grandpa worked there. There were kids that parents worked there that went to the high school that my mom went to. So, all these things are just like, well, why, how did this Bennis end up in Bloomington? Like, why would his nephew want to teach, botany or whatever at Indiana University. And so that's what I've been trying to do, is put that together and figure that out. And then, of course, with Terre Haute, Indiana, that has a lot of intrigue now because, I always base my stuff on like stupid questions, like how does Jamal Khashoggi, who is being presented to us as a person that was assassinated by Mohammed bin Salman in the Turkish embassy, as a journalist for, saying, speaking out against Saudi Arabia, how does he end up in Terre Haute, Indiana, at Indiana State University for a master's? Of all the places in the world, why would he go to Indiana State? It makes no sense. His uncle was the biggest gun runner of the 70s and 80s with the Lockheed scandal. Why does he end up there? So the answer is that a guy named Lee DeBridge, whose father was the football coach at Indiana State Teachers College in Terre Haute, he was the creator or the first lead scientist of the Rad Lab at MIT. So a guy from Terre Haute, Indiana, ends up being the head of the radiation lab with Vannevar Bush and Carl Compton and the Loomis and, all of the, great scientists, the Manhattan Project and all these things. It's a guy from Terre Haute. So the other person that had a parent that worked at Indiana State, which was called Indiana State Teachers College, is William King Harvey. So you're doing your book now about Berlin and Wisner and these guys running operations in the Stay Behind Army. Well, William King Harvey is about as big of a name in there as you can get, because he was working under Wisner, and then he ends up being one of the co-leaders of Jam Wave with Lansdale and doing the Operation Mongoose. So all these intrigues of like, well, how do these people end up in Indiana? I mean, it literally is so hard for me to believe, because it's like, it's the whole, it's like very farmland there. So I'm, going through those things, and it's, and again, the next answer is, well, who's Churchill's other really good friend that signed his immigration papers when he came from Russia? It's Chaim Weizmann, who becomes the first president of Israel. Okay, so if you're fleeing Russia, going to England, where you're friends with the Victor Rothschild and Churchill and Bennis and all these guys, and Churchill signed your immigration paper, why are you starting your chemical company, Commercial Solvents Corporation, in Terre Haute, Indiana? How do you even know where Terre Haute is? If you're from Russia and then you move to London and you're traveling in these top circles, how do you end up in Terre Haute with your company? It doesn't make sense, right?
It reminds me of hidden in plain sight. In other words, they say, well, where's the most unlikely place that you would ever want to start a chemical factory? And they, well, how about, in the great middle America, right in the middle of nowhere, yeah, hidden in plain sight.
So those are the kinds of things that I look at. And then, of course, Weitzman, as we've talked about, and again, I know this is like, the George Washington of Israel, but, he starts the Weissman Clinic, and who's he starting it? Who's he starting it with? He's starting it with the Schiff family, and it's Schiff, Daniel Schiff, and they have a department store called, it's not Lord and Taylor, I forget the name of it, but they start this Weitzman Clinic, and of course this Daniel Schiff, he's the one that wants the Willow Run factory, which is the largest factory, which is in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where they build the B-24s, which of course has deep ties to the B-24 bomber factory in Fort Worth, Texas. Why is this mile-long assembly line where they can build one B-24 per hour, the biggest war factory in the world, after World War II, you know, Ford decides to get rid of it. And so who buys it? It's Henry Kaiser, right? Henry Kaiser, the industrialist that's from out in Oakland, who's partnered with Bechtel, right? He was the 6 companies. Bechtel and Kaiser were the lead contractors on the Hoover Dam. So it's like, okay, so now you've got Bechtel, and which is sort of a company that's under the tutelage of the Schroeder Bank Company, which again is now, Dulles Brothers, Sullivan and Cromwell again. So, and again, it's like on a personal note, it's like, well, why did Edgar Kaiser buy the house directly across from where my great grandpa lived? I mean, it's like literally, it's so creepy to me, because here's this guy that, comes from Kaiser Aluminum or whatever, Kaiser Steel out in Washington State, moves to Barton Hills, Michigan, which is right next to Ann Arbor, starts running this Kaiser or this Willow Run factory, making, cars. And it's like Kaiser Fraser is the company now that goes to Israel after Ford backs out, because the Arab League's going to blackball them if they go to the new state of Israel in 48. So instead, it's Kaiser Fraser that goes there. So what are they doing at Willow Run besides building B-24s? They also have the Bomark program, which was the first surface-to-air missile system, was built. The Mark in Bomark, the Bo is Boeing, the Mark is Michigan Aeronautical Research Center, through the University of Michigan on Willow Run factory. That was the Bomark missile. And so so that's what I'm thinking. Did they just take the tooling from Willow Run, to build all these planes? Did they just move it to Israel? Was that the plan? Because we know that the person that negotiated that transfer of Kaiser Fraser's automotive technology was Hickman Price, and he was the plant manager of Willow Run, and he worked with the guy that was in the Sterner gang. His name was Ephraim Illan. It's like Efranillin. He was somebody that did helped Israel arm for the revolution in 48 with Czechoslovakia, back to Czechoslovakia again. And who else was the key broker of Czechoslovakia to weapons in Israel? Robert Maxwell. That was where Robert Maxwell started. He was a Czechoslovakian that transferred, IP and war material for the creation of Israel. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, right. I mean, I'm
Blame
still blown away. All of these
Yeah.
connections you've
I don't
made.
want to blame them on everything, but somebody should also explain why Cham Weitzman, as this George Washington, hires Fritz Haber from IG Farben, the head of their chemical lab that does chlorine gases in World War I. Why did you hire the chemical gasser from IG, or I'm sorry, not IG Farben, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute? Why do you hire the director of Kaiser Wilhelm Institute to become the founding chemical engineer of your Weitzman Institute? That's something that needs to be explained, because that sounds like you're bringing in a chemical weapon person after you have made major war crime claims about, which really happened, where lots of people died. A lot of people died from gases from IG Farben and from Kaiser Wilhelm, right? But if you can't partner with them, if that's what you're claiming, I'm sorry, I hate being that personal on it, but I feel like my family ended up, dead in ditches or whatever. But it's like, you can't hire the person. And I know Rockefeller did the exact same thing, and we've talked about Gottlieb and Traub and all these guys that they're bringing in. But you can't do that. You can't do that and then say, all this slaughtering of people was done with chemical and gas weapons. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make sense. Somebody has to answer that. That is not a to me, that is just, it's an unbelievable thing that needs to be explained.
For me, let's go back to the Weitzman Clinic, or I was just trying to find it. It's apparently called the Weitzman Institute now. Does that make sense? I am not familiar with that. So
Mhm.
when did he start it, and what is the purpose of it? Is it like a
So
medical
yeah,
institute? What is it?
it's their so the things that are intriguing about Weitzman is that it is their leading medical center, but it also created what was called the WiMech computer, and that was their first supercomputer, and it was in partnership with John von Neumann at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. So we're right back in Princeton with Sarnoff again, and with the RCA lab, and with Dulles being Princeton alumni, all this stuff. So the person that started the international, or the Institute for Advanced Studies, is Abraham Flexner, right? Who's Abraham Flexner? He wrote the Flexner Report for the Carnegie Foundation. Who's his brother? Simon Flexner. He's the director of Rockefeller University, the medical part of the Rockefeller Foundation. Okay, so these are all deeply connected. I'm not just saying, oh, this one group is the bad one, but what I'm saying is they partnered with people, and it is, to me, it's just really upsetting for me, because again, I mean, I feel like everyone should be upset, but it is the same, using the full force of the media and all these things to tell these horrible stories, to shame people, to ruin people's lives. I mean, that has happened to so many people, and um, so the Weitzman Institute is like, that's like, I mean, it's basically like attacking like a John Hopkins or whatever. But of course, if you get into the history of John Hopkins, that's tying right back to Daniel Coit Gilman, who
Skull
was
and Bones.
founder of Skull and Bones, and what else was he the founder of? The Peabody Foundation, right, for George Peabody, who is the partner of J.P. Morgan's dad, Junius Morgan, that is of course partners with Drexel. So of course, when you get to your Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert, with Michael Milken as the running it for the savings and loan crisis, or I'm sorry, the junk bonds, right? Who's leading the Milken Institute now, which is at George Washington University, their School of Public Health. And then he's got Fauci and Peggy Hamburg and Rick Bright talking about the need for new non-egg based technologies to be used. Seems like it's the same people over and over. It seems literally like it's the same people. And with Trump pardoning Milken, I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah, folks, if you're not aware, the Milken Institute sponsored a seminar on what was it, October of 2019, right before the pandemic became a pandemic, and in that, this Rick Bright just literally spit it out. He said, "Well, we need some kind of a extraordinary, what was he call it,
And excitement, an event. They need
transitional event to get people to accept this wonderful new medicine that we've created."
to make
And
it so that people want it, like that people are dying to get it. I mean, that's literally the language he used, make it sexy.
make it sexy, yeah. But I had not. You just tied together so many things for me that I started having questions, and then they all stacked up, and then I thought, oh God, there's so many questions. I'm just going to have to replay this myself for my own benefit, and pick all this apart. That's amazing. Those are amazing connections. Our good friend Mark Kulak wanted to point out to you on the chat. He says the anthrax factory for World War II was in Virgo, next to Terre Haute.
Vigo Ordnance Factory. And
Yeah.
And so so if we're talking Commercial Solvents Corporation, which was the Cham Weitzman's company in Terre Haute, Indiana, the person that started his career there was William Patrick III. Mark Kulak will know William Patrick III's name because he then becomes the lead biological and chemical weapon expert at Fort Detrick during the conversion to the with 72, when they get out of, when they scale back and create the war on cancer. He's also the person that goes into Iraq and is the expert that says Saddam's got the chems. He's the guy. He was the expert. So he started his career at Commercial Solvents in Terre Haute. And yes, Vigo Ordnance Factory, I've talked a lot about it. It was where Ira Baldwin, who of course is from Indiana and then goes to University of Wisconsin, where he starts the biology department. And Joshua Lederberg later ends up at Wisconsin. So this Ira Baldwin goes and sets up Vigo Ordnance Factory and Fort Detrick, and they are the leading maker of anthrax and botulism. And who orders 500,000 rounds? Winston Churchill for the British Army from, again, Terre Haute, Indiana. Why does everybody want to go to Terre Haute? I literally, it is like, makes no sense to me how they pick Terre Haute. And that's, of course, that's where my grandma went to college. I mean, it's 30 miles from where my grandparents grew up, but if you want to get into the dark part of it, well, who else grew up in Petersburg, Indiana, very close to there, right? It's John Watson Foster, the grandfather of the Dulles brothers, is from Petersburg, Indiana. Okay, so there are all these weird things. You got to go back to the Indiana, the Northwest Territories, when Vincennes is the capital, and you've got the Harrisons, which are, of course, a big Virginia founding family that ends up becoming the governor of the Northwest Territory and the Indiana Territories, all this stuff. But it all ties into the history of the Louisiana Purchase, is a lot of it, because this Wabash River that my grandparents all lived on, which basically was the ancient Indian trading route from the Great Lakes in Chicago. They portage and then they get onto the Wabash River and the White River, and then that's how they get to the Ohio, to get to the Mississippi, to get to New Orleans. So that was the original transportation route, and that was, of course, owned by New France for years, and then New Spain. So there were very strict rules about trade on the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers, and this is where a lot of this stuff ties into, and it's how Terre Haute becomes, again, which is a place that you just would never dream has all this intrigue. But that's why, is because it was part of the old trade of, taking goods from the Midwest, from the Great Lakes, and then transporting them to, places like St. Louis that we think of as a huge transportation hub, the gateway to the West, and then also to New Orleans, which of course has all the United Fruit Company intrigues. And then, historically, you can go back to all the age of sail with the, Isabel and Ferdinand and Columbus and all those. That was where they were exploring, was the Caribbean. And then, you've got, you want to talk about the Habsburgs, you got Charles V, who's chartering these conquests of the Aztecs and Incas, so that's all tied to it. And that's what I've been sort of trying to figure out, is this, the history of these Habsburgs. And because that's a huge question for me, is why did the Holy Roman Empire disappear? And also, why do we almost universally think that was a really good thing, and that the face of it was sort of the Third Reich coming back, like, we're going to restore the Holy Roman Empire, and that's going to be the Germans, the Nazis. And so I'm very intrigued by all of that. Who were the players, what was happening, who was married to who, because the whole Reformation and all of the intrigue of England going between the Catholic Church and the Church of England is all tied to this, because it's, Philip II, who was the husband of Bloody Mary that people just remember from Alice in Wonderland, but she was the wife of Philip II, and so there's a lot of intrigues there. Those are sort of things I've been trying to learn, because again, it's like I feel like we're just fed these stupid stories. I mean, I'll just go back to Khashoggi because I feel like it's like so relevant now because Biden just visited MBS. But it's like, how do we feed the world a story where we literally have the United Nations saying this guy was murdered in cold blood as a journalist that wrote, bad things against Saudi Arabia, murdered in an embassy, where we shouldn't do any trade relations now with Saudi Arabia because of this. Yet we completely ignore that his uncle, Adnan Khashoggi, was the lead beneficiary of the Lockheed scandal, which, Prince Bernard was taken out in, right? Is the Safari Club, is the World Wildlife Fund. We're going to completely ignore that that's his uncle. We're also going to completely ignore that Dodi Fayed is his cousin, right? That dies in the tunnel with Princess Diana. Oh, we're just going to say, oh, he was a intrepid journalist that was just fighting against the oppressive regime of Saudi Arabia. We're not going to mention the petrodollar system that we set up in Saudi Arabia, like the settling oil in U.S. dollars and getting off the gold standard. Like that's not a factor. It's just a brutal MBS. And I'm not making MBS out to be a good guy, but it's like the story's so stupid that, how is this what we feed? And literally at the highest levels. I mean, Biden was criticized for, the fist bumping MBS just last week.
Another tie-in to my recent reading is your question, and Harry Han Cannon has the same question. How powerful is Karl von Habsburg today? And it ties into, well, he's the son of Otto von Habsburg, and so he is the heir of the throne of Austria-Hungary, the kingdom, as well as the remnants of what is now had been declared extinct in 1806, and that is the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was declared extinct under Napoleon, and so there's the short answer right there.
Yeah.
But going back, I think the real death of the Holy Roman Empire was foretold with the donation of Pepin, because you had a division of power, of the spiritual power with the Pope, and the temporal power, or that is, the political power over armies and people and money, with the emperor. But when the Pope becomes a landowner himself, he owns the middle third of Italy, then he gets his army and he has his own temporal interests, which he's still pursuing today. Even though his country is only a postage stamp, it's still a temporal interest that he has, that he's still projecting out, to try to do things like get more Catholics and take away from the Muslims and the Orthodox and everyone else. But the interesting thing is that it was at the end of World War II, and both the Habsburgs have been dethroned in both instances at the end of the World War I, right? Well, so he no longer has any power, and according to the book, he didn't have any money. But it was Winston Churchill who reinvigorated the Habsburgs as a force within the European community, and a driving force of this intermarium idea, a driving force of what really would be the revival of the Holy Roman Empire under the guidance of the World Economic Forum, with Klaus Schwab playing the role of Otto von Habsburg, and that that seems comical to us, but doggone, that is the way things are going, is that with the influence of, see, when we think of Churchill, Churchill is the front man for the City of London banks, right? And
Yeah.
not for the royalty. An earlier question was on the chat room was, what's the difference between MI5 and MI6? And it's a huge difference during the Cold War. And MI6 is out there working with these with Benish and all of these foreign intrigue, whereas MI5 is basically trying to preserve the royalty.
Yeah.
Uh, so
It,
you have the interests of the City of London represented by Churchill, whereas the interests of the royalty would be represented by the Tories, or the more conservative side of British politics, and that is a huge difference that I didn't know
yeah.
existed until I started doing the work, a few months ago.
I just want to add one quick thing. I just think of it as the FBI and the CIA. So one of them is domestic and one is international.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Wow, what a morning. I got an awful lot of follow-up to do, but I
Yeah.
think we're really onto something. And to me, that when I started realizing that there is this third force that was called the Synarchy for a while, and has had the Phalangist in Spain, and all of these other things, they are reflected in all of this, with the Vatican and the Roman Catholic side having its eternal dispute, going back to the schism with the Orthodox patriarchs, and so it has so many dimensions, but it's not too many for us to grasp. We can wrap our arms around this, especially with the help we get from all the great colleagues we have on the chat room, and other people's work. I don't think any of us are trying to make money at this. We're all here to try to expose the truth, so that we can get rid of this nightmare, this narrative, this false reality that they're trying to shove down our throats with every means possible. So you're a
Well,
big part of it, David. Thank you so much. You're right in the middle of a whole lot of intrigue, but somehow, it's kind of like you and me
I
both
call it.
have been somehow saved from it
It
to this point in time. And
it's
now,
just the one that really got me this week was learning about a character named Thomas Hunt Morgan, who was from Kentucky. He started the Fly Lab in Columbia, and then he was out. He started the biology program at Caltech in the 1930s. And if you look at his background, he is related to my grandpa Key 100%, because his relative is Francis Scott Key. He's got the Wesley. He's from Kentucky. Same. I mean, it's like literally the exact same background. So I've been going through the thing, and I'm like, oh my God, like, because it's like, well, how the heck did Herman Muller end up in Bloomington, right? How does he end up there? Why is this guy born in Germany that's invited by um, all or not Aldous Huxley, but the World Wildlife founder Huxley, Julian Huxley, invites him to start a bio program at Rice University, who Mark is doing the shows on the Rice roommates right now, the Rice medical guys. Why is this Muller guy going to Bloomington? And who was his mentor? It's this Thomas Hunt Morgan from Kentucky, from University of Kentucky in Lexington, who ends up starting the Fly Lab in Columbia, right? And that was how those two met. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. And again, it's like, I do feel like I've been spared somehow, but I know that I'm like related to all this because, we talk about Churchill, and I've joked about it, but my, Aunt Shirley Jerome from Grosse Pointe, she's related to Leonard Jerome, right? I mean, that's the same family. They're one of them went to Detroit to do the surveying of Detroit in the, I mean, they're the oldest family business in Michigan. I think they're 8 generations of surveyors in Michigan. And Leonard Jerome is the business partner of August Belmont, who's one of the Rothschild's biggest agents in World War, or, in Reconstruction. So that's Churchill's mom, is this Jenny Jerome, who grew up in Madison Square Park in New York, and then marries Randolph Churchill. And there's a lot of interest in Randolph because he was classmates with Lord Rosebery and Benjamin Disraeli. So a lot of these old kind of intrigues, like, you can see where they start shaping, because Churchill's dad was, high school buds with 2 future prime ministers, including the, Lord Rosebery, who ended up marrying this girl named Hannah de Rothschild, who was the wealthiest heiress in all of Europe. So it's kind of like, gosh, there's a lot of, she's the granddaughter of Nathan Mayer. So it's like, it seems like we can pinpoint where the, where the influence of Churchill lies, because again, he is a British petroleum agent. He puts the Navy on petroleum. Very important.
Very important indeed. And all of those influences. Disraeli is somebody we haven't talked about yet on Macduff Lives here, but we'll get to him, him and his Tancredi, and the incredible interplay between the kind of pseudo history of a Sir Walter Scott and Benjamin Disraeli's novels, and the idea of the combination of the kind of mythical Jewish archetype history with the Anglo-Saxon archetype history that happens in the 19th century. I'm going to be studying that some more too. But honestly, David, this has been an awesome show for me, and I've learned so much. I did not know about the Weizmann Institute. And anyway, we're going to have Mark with us Wednesday night. I will look forward to that, and thank you all for being with us. I am taking the rest of the weekend off, and looking forward to seeing you guys on Monday. So thanks, David Cranmer Underdown. Once again, thanks to each of you. If you want to support the show, there's a button for Patreon over at screamingospreys.com. And thank you all who have supported us along the way to this point. Amen. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.